Watching NewsX, my name is Vineet Malhotra. A recent Niti Aayog report has highlighted that India's multi-dimensional poverty has decreased from 29.17% in 2013-14 to 11.28% in 22-23, signifying the upliftment of a total of 24.82 crore individuals. That's a big number. Well, the report indicates that Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and Madhya Pradesh have shown the most significant decline in this regard. By definition, national multi-dimensional poverty measures simultaneous deprivations across three equally weighted dimensions of health, education and standard of living. The parameters. This progress aligns with Prime Minister Modi's 2047 mission, which aims to make India a developed nation by 2047 across various aspects of development, including economic growth, social progress and good governance. Well, as things look positive, the question that arises is, what is it going to take for India to become a zero poverty country? That is the big question that we are going to pose to our guest as well. Dr. Sharat Kohli, senior economist, joins us on the program. Professor Madhav Nalapad, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is also here with us. Dr. Satish Prasad Rath, doctor, scientist and entrepreneur, with us on the show as well. Last but not the least, Mr. Kaustav Majumdar, human rights defender, with us on the program too. Professor Nalapad, I'll begin with you, sir. Sir, 25 odd crore people being uplifted out of poverty is a huge number. That is almost the population of a big country, for that matter, the population of perhaps the United States. What do you make of this achievement? And, how should the government be patting itself on the back? But also, this should not become a case of complacency.
Well, Vineet, I'd like to point out that fundamental human right is the right to a good education, healthcare, housing, and the necessities of life in an adequate fashion. And the reality is that under colonial rule, all these metrics went down very sharply, as they had been for some centuries previously as well. But the fact of the matter is that this particular transformation that we are seeing is not a surprise. In fact, the last 10 years has been a decade of real transformation in the country. And I think the reason is, frankly, the leveraging of technology to ensure that certain outcomes. For example, technology to ensure the more access to healthcare, more access to education, more access to opportunities. I think that has been a very, very important factor. And the second factor has been this flow that has been maintained on living standards of an individual, so that nobody in India needs to go to bed hungry at night. I think that's a very, very important thing for a country of 1.4 billion people that had hunger spread across hundreds of millions of people. So I think these are two factors. The first, the use of technology. And secondly, if I may say so, the creating a floor so that nobody needs to go to bed hungry every night. Secondly, a floor for healthcare. And thirdly, increasingly, a floor for housing. And very, very importantly, I think that's going to come the next 3 or 4 years, a very rising floor for education. Because the important thing is, where you may be underprivileged economically, but if you are, if you are enabled to get a good education, then that can end. And more importantly, you can help others also end similar poverty.
Absolutely. Dr. Kohli, what do you make of this number? And what do you attribute this mammoth success to? And what will it take? I know zero poverty is perhaps not a plausible reality. Even the most developed countries, have an element of poverty, but of course the reasons for them are absolutely different. This is a mammoth figure, and India is obviously headed in the right path. What do you make of what's happened over here, and what is that model according to you that was implemented by the government at the right time, which of course pervades education and social upliftment, that worked?
Thanks, Vineet. Very well articulated question, I must say, the way you put it. Well, I think for me, the biggest takeaway is the whole methodology itself. Poverty until now was defined by 27 rupees a day, Tendulkar committee and this committee, 35 rupees a day, 47 rupees a day, and so on. So different committees, different governments had their own interpretation to poverty. Poverty was basically defined as how much money do you have in your pocket, or bank for that matter. I think that's the obvious definition of poverty, which I think most people understand. But I think the best part of this is an international method of ascertaining poverty. And the good thing which Niti Aayog has done is, instead of taking 10 parameters, they have taken 12 parameters or indicators, whatever you want to call it. And I think the new definition of poverty is the best thing which has happened. Even more than 25 crore people coming out of poverty, Vineet. For me, a bigger takeaway is that the way we look at poverty has changed. Poverty is not about your bank balance. And I have a very easy example. Somebody having 5 lakh rupees in the bank met me a few days ago and he says, I'm a very poor man. And somebody who had 10,000 rupees in his bank, but his children were getting education, he had a toilet, he had a house, he was getting nutrition, he was accessible to health facilities, he had water, he had electricity, he was beneficiary of the Nal Jal Yojana electricity. He said, I'm not a poor man. So, you see, the way we look at poverty, for me, that is a bigger takeaway than the number itself. Although the number itself is huge, we can never ignore the number. I mean, the size of this number is the size of probably Pakistani population. Bihar, Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, these were the 3 most inflicted states as far as poverty is concerned. And I think with these 3 states leading the pack, where most people have come out of poverty, I think that for me is the bigger takeaway. And what surprises me, Vineet, is for 75 long years or 74 long years, now I also include this government for that matter until now, because these numbers, we saw 13.5 crore people being alleviated out of poverty in the last 5 years. And now, of course, they have extrapolated this to 9 years. So my surprise is that why for last 75 years, we did not look at poverty from this angle, from this point of view. This Alki-Foster method is being used internationally. Why did we not implement? Why did it take us so long to identify that a poor person cannot be poor if you give him everything that makes him poor? You give him everything. Money is not what drives poverty. That, I think, this for me, Vineet, is the bigger takeaway. Now, the second part, that where do we go from here, is a zero poverty situation in 2047, when India becomes developed, the Amrit Kal, the dream, the vision. Is that a possible dream? The question raised by you. My answer is yes and no. Even if you go to United States today, you travel so much, Vineet. I keep watching you on social media. You travel to Europe, you travel to America. Tell me, have you seen zero poverty in the world's biggest and richest economy, United States of America? The answer is no. You walk in Manhattan, you walk in Manhattan, one of the biggest financial centers of the world, and you will find people begging there. The way they beg may be different. They may not knock at your car door, but they beg in different ways. So zero poverty for me is a dream which can never be achieved, but we can at least aspire to reach there. And the best way to reach there, Vineet, if I give a one-line answer, that, I say remove unemployment, I say very idealistic statement. I make very idealistic statement, reduce the gap between the haves and have-nots. Those are idealistic. But on the ground level, if you ask me, the best way forward is the answer lies in 2 words: manufacture more and more in India. And for God's sake, bring your agriculture into profit. If you do these 2 things, Vineet, you'll be surprised. 2047 is a far off year. You will achieve this probably in the next 10 to 15 years itself. Whether that's doable or not doable is another question. How that is to be done is another question. But here is the answer to the title of your debate, that if you do this, but for me, I reiterate, for me, bigger takeaway is the methodology which we have now used to calculate or to ascertain poverty, Vineet.
Well articulated, Dr. Kohli. I completely concur with you. And you're right. You go to San Francisco, you go to Los Angeles, you go to Manhattan, there is poverty on the streets. It does not mean, that there's something wrong with the country. It just mean that perhaps, an absolute state where you have zero poverty is not plausible. And perhaps that also should not be the aim here, Dr. Rath. You should be looking at uplifting people when it comes to their education. Dr. Kohli also said that, we need to manufacture more in India, more opportunities need to be created. And to some extent, Dr. Rath, wealth is also relative. A lakh rupees for someone may not be as much for another person. So obviously all these these paradoxes need to be construed by the government before a strategy is developed. But a strategy has been developed, and that's why we are seeing these mammoth numbers, Dr. Rath.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vineet, for having me here amongst the good panelists. So I think, the first takeaway, as Sarath was also saying, is the methodology. Because, so far we have been really talking about the tangible, pocket value, to define either poverty or not. What I really like in this methodology, which is also scientific, if you think about behavioral economics or healthcare economics, is we are considering now health and education along with standard of living. So standard of living we can put in somebody's pocket, like housing, or let's say like cooking gas, or drinking water and electricity. Still, the person might not be able to stay, let's say, come out of poverty, because we have to give him health and education. I think these are the most important parts, which is actually included into this. Now, if we think about this, what has happened now is we know in what category which states have got, their stunting, their school dropouts, their adolescent issues, and their child issues. We always have to remember, whenever we are talking about, let's say, economics of our country, we are a young country. We have 50% of our population who are getting ready to the skilled workforce of the world. So if we can give them education, if we can give them health, which is becoming disruptively low cost now. So, we can definitely, make, many states come out of poverty in a very, very easy way. I will just give you an example. One of my startups is actually called S-Kids, which is called Smart and Super Kids. We go to the school. We actually monitor all their health parameters, which can give us very objectively, what is their stunting, what is their, growth, what is their health parameters, as well as, are they, affected behaviorally, so that, they are dropping out of the school. Along with that, we also measure hemoglobin non-invasively. Now, what this methodology actually is having implications is we can identify a target population. Let's say it is in Bihar, or let's say it's in Orissa, let's say it's in the northeastern states. We can cover the entire school-going population. We can identify which are the kids, which are having which kind of, let's say, issues, and we can address them. So what I like about the methodology is you identify the target population, you can monitor them objectively, scientifically, at a very low cost at the primary care level, and you can also intervene them. So, this is the next level, beyond the Ujala and the, Nal Se Jal and the housing and giving the cash to the Jan Dhan accounts. I think, similarly, we need to create this health and education accounts so that, we are ensuring people are having good health. And this is not expensive. This is not, very, very difficult to do. We can still do with the budget, whatever we have for the Anganwadi workers and the, let's say, adolescent care from, Ministry of Child and, Health, as well as Ministry of Health, whatever we are, doing it in a very inefficient manner, we can repurpose the same stuff to actually address it in a very targeted manner. So the target population, the intervention, and you also can measure it with the output. So what I really feel good about this is a very doable stuff in a scientific manner, not like let's say, like, we all want, India to have, as less poverty as possible. This is not possible to make it absolute zero, but, we can take a tangible target, what our Prime Minister also likes it, okay, identify the problem area, have a scientific intervention. Even our last year, let's say, Nobel Prize was also for these kind of, let's say, experiments. You go to the problem area, experiment with smaller experiments, and then actually, take the output. So this is very doable. That is the biggest, joy which is giving me.
Right.
And because I'm in between this, doing this, at present, and this is also giving me more joy that, yes, this is the addressable issue. What we have been thinking that, Garibi Hatao is more of a, political, let's say, gimmick before elections. But this is very, very tangible and achievable. So that's what, is giving me a lot of, actually satisfaction.
Absolutely. And you're right about that. Obviously, the microcosm is going to lead to that macro result, and that's what we're aiming for. Let me also get a point in from Kaustav Majumdar, human rights defender. Kaustav, now you're on the other side of the spectrum. You actually get to work with people who are either elevated out of, extreme abject poverty, or you deal with people who are still a part of it. You perhaps have a ringside view of what's really going on. Please educate our audience. That does not in any way denigrate the achievement that India has, achieved of elevating so many people out of extreme poverty.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to NewsX for inviting me and allowing me to present my views on this very particularly important development that we see, and it's a very positive development. I would like to state in the beginning that in the past 9 years, we have lifted 25 crore people out of poverty. But I would also like to say that it's not completely unexpected, because you see, the United Nations Development Program, the UNDP, had released similar data last year in July, stating that from the 2005-6 to 2019-21 15 years period, India lifted a massive amount of 41.5 crore people out of poverty. So the Niti Aayog paper, it just further corroborates this data, and it's absolutely immense, proud to be about this data point. And what is significant that the discussion paper has raised is the role that welfare measures and social security schemes. And you will see that India has a plethora of social security schemes targeted for the most marginalized people. For example, the public distribution scheme under the National Food Security Act, or the Poshan Abhiyan, or the Anganwadi services. I'm just naming few of them, even the Ujjwala Yojana or the Jal Jeevan Mission. So these schemes have been mentioned in the report by Niti Aayog that they have played a critical role in reducing multidimensional poverty across the country. Now, for example, ActionAid Association had conducted a study during the COVID period in 2020, covering almost 17,000 informal sector workers. And it showed that 85% of the respondents dependent on the public distribution scheme for maintaining food security during the pandemic. So therefore, it is important that such welfare measures continue and be made further accessible to ensure that no person is left behind. And while I say that there are, and these are obviously very positive trends, but the report itself identifies areas of certain continued deprivation and also notes that around 11.5% of people are still in poverty. That is also a huge number. Now, important deprivation areas you will see are, for example, cooking, fuel, and housing, access to these services. So I feel that we need more social security measures targeting these indicators. And I feel the government is already taking steps in doing this, because you see, yesterday only, the Prime Minister has released the first installment for Pakka housing scheme for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. It is going to benefit almost 1 lakh people. So such initiatives ensuring that the working people have access to housing and that they are not evicted from their housing before providing them proper rehabilitation, these will be important in addressing such deprivation. Even if you see the PDS, if I go back to the PDS scheme, so the One Nation, One Ration card that was introduced during the pandemic, rather, so that needs to be expedited. So that, again, the migrant population, they have their access to the rightful food grains. And also, we all have seen in the newspapers in the past 2-3 weeks that for the NREGS workers, the Aadhaar-based payment system has been made mandatory. And we have seen that almost 35% of people have been made ineligible. Now, I completely agree with Professor Nalapat's view that technology is very much important in addressing such measures, such poverty reduction measures. We see the Jan Dhan Yojana being an important facet in that, but we also need to ensure that the government must proactively ensure that these workers who are not being eligible for work are immediately made eligible and any technical difficulties or paperwork or digital processes that such access to such schemes have is not hindering the registration of workers. Because if these things are hindering, then we are again falling out of the growth trajectory that we are in.
Absolutely. Professor Nalapat, Dr. Rath mentioned that, technology is going to be, a big partner when it comes to conquering this juggernaut of a problem that we've been dealing with for so long. It's important not to rest on our laurels, but it is also important, to create an environment where, people who are still struggling with poverty to be educated how to get out of it.
You're quite right, Vineet. And may I point out that, if you're in the past, where you used to go across the world you used to go to other parts of India, and we would find people from UP and Bihar coming to these parts of India, Maharashtra, the South, etc., Gujarat, and they were doing very well. Now, some of the most, if I may say, some of the most talented people that we have come from Bihar. But at the same time, you find that if you had gone to Bihar, and it was very dismal, the situation there. So what was the difference? The difference was governance. And I think that is very, very important. The difference is commitment and governance. So you had a situation in which there were doles in the past as well. But the reality is that doles are not enough. You need an enabling environment for people to progress. It's not enough that you just give a dole. You have to create an enabling environment. Like we talk about a startup economy, start up one's life, start up one's career, start up one's educational success. And I think that enabling environment has been very systematically put in place over the last 10 years. And I think that has made a big difference. Why? Because people now have expectation and hope that their future will be better. If they had no hope, they'd be content to take the dole and then relax. I mean, I've seen personally in many of these schemes, in some locations, people would basically do the minimum amount of what was asked for in the scheme, and then they would do nothing. And why would they do nothing? Because they said it's okay, we got our minimum needs. Now ambitions have gone up, expectations have gone up, and as a consequence, hard work and effort are also going up. I think this rise of ambition, this rise of expectation is also to do with the fact that Prime Minister Modi, for example, he comes from very underprivileged background and he has reached where he has. So there is a feeling that you can be empowered. It's not a hopeless situation that you find yourself in if you come from a background that is underprivileged. And I think this confidence in people, especially in the young, is a very important catalyst for what you're seeing. And I have very, very good augury for the fact that the remainder, this 11.5 crores, should also be lifted off, hopefully, as Sharad says, sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. We've run out of time. Concluding thoughts from the remainder of our guests, starting with Dr. Kohli, and we wrap up with Kaustav.
Well, I'll just quickly like to state, Vineet, that I have two more points here. One, I have seen that people who come out of poverty, these 25 crore people, you need to monitor it very closely because there is a chance that these people can easily slip back below that index. So I think a very strict monitoring system has to be in place. Kaustav did touch upon that fact that, you need to have a very, very strict monitoring system because it's very easy. They're very vulnerable. They can slip back into this index if 2 or 3 pointers, they go wrong. That's my first point. My second and very important point before you hand over to the others is that we should not leave it here. I mean, apart from the 11% people that you spoke of, Vineet, what about these 24 crore people? One, they are out of MPI. As far as this index is concerned, them up the graph. You can't just leave them here that, okay, we've done our job, 25 crore people out of poverty. India is a rich country. I'm afraid that's not the goal. The goal is to take the next step forward. I think a very strict and a very, very efficient system has to be in place to make sure that they keep climbing this ladder. Otherwise, they can fall down beneath the first point that I state. That's all I wanted to say. There's a long list I have for this topic, but unfortunately, because of paucity of time, I'll try and restrain myself here.
All right. Dr. Rath, quickly, please, 30 seconds to you and Kaustav, and then we wrap up.
Yeah, very important topic. So I would just say that, the biggest part is this is very positive and this is very doable, again, through technology. And I would say that, it's high time we merge school health and education together. And we repurpose the budget from Anganwadi worker and Rashtriya Child Health and Ministry of Health. There is a lot of, inefficient programs which are running. Merge the budgets into school health and education, is a very important, part for taking the top 2 parameters of health and education. This is going to actually take us a long way. And the second part, I would say that part is let's move from here in a positive mindset. Through technological platform, we can reach out. If you could give actually vaccine to all of the people, which is unthinkable. This is also equally same way possible that, we can make these people, come out of poverty by making them enablers. So not to give directly money to their pockets, but actually making them able so that, they are actually coming out of the, let's say from their background through some innovation, through some, let's say, their entrepreneurship or their self-effort. And they are very capable. And we have seen people, groups actually, when they are intervened at the right level, being doing that.
Kaustav?
Yeah, so I would like to concur with what Dr. Sharad has said. the fact that we need proper monitoring, and for proper monitoring, we need data-driven policy, which this report also underscores. So we need data on consumption and expenditure data, which household consumption data, which is long overdue now, and many economists have called for this data to be surveys to be conducted. And also, I want to touch upon a point that, see, one of the most important factors that is going to influence poverty reduction or poverty alleviation in the future is climate change. And India has been a pioneering country in climate policy. So the government needs to be proactive in having climate policies which ensure that people who are currently in poverty or are currently just moving out of poverty, they do not fall back to poverty. Because the UNDP has already estimated that around 10 crore people will fall back to extreme poverty by the year 2030. So we need proactive measures by the government to ensure that that does not happen. And thank you for that.
All right, great points, everyone. And Dr. Kohli was right. It's a huge topic. It requires, a longer amount of time to be dedicated to the issues and the solutions that can be provided. Unfortunately, we have that. We don't have that kind of time.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.